it's Drybear. Yesterday, I put out my Shimmer Sharen build, which focused on optimizing single target burst DPS for Colossi and boss encounters. And I talked about how it was an evolution of a more generic build that I've been using for my Sharen for quite a long time, and people had asked for that build, so here it is. That's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to call it the Shimmer Sharen. This is more like what you'd expect from normal Sharen builds, trying to maximize the reuse of stealth and then use weapons that kind of scale off of that, rather than trying to maximize the single target burst damage of it. I think the Spine Shatter Sharen, when played correctly, is actually a better option for Colossi specifically, but it certainly is very specific and requires a lot of resource management, HP management, and timing and accuracy to do right, whereas this build, the Shimmer Sharen, is going to be a lot more wide use. So just like all my other builds, I'll put the build sheet down below in the description and in the comments, and I'll upload it to the gallery for all of my Descendant builds as well. This is going to be kind of similar to the Spine Shatter, but we're only going to use one sniper rifle. The Afterglow sword is the best option when it's fully maxed out. If you ever wanted to know the difference between the Afterglow sword and the Piercing Light is far better when it's like low upgrade or just out of the box, like no new unique abilities, only a couple mods. Piercing Light's going to outperform Afterglow sword, but if you upgrade both of them to their max, Afterglow sword will outperform Piercing Light. So it depends on how far along into investment. You could certainly craft one of the Piercing Light, and when you have just a couple mods, use that while you're upgrading the Afterglow sword, and then switch over towards the end of that. The second weapon of choice here, in my opinion, the best option for this build specifically, is the Silly Weeper. Now again, what we're going to be doing with this build is we're going to be activating stealth to get the ambush bonus plus overcharged edge to do as much damage as possible in a single shot. And so what we want a low fire rate weapon with high base firearm attack and good crit chance profile, so we can scale off of that, and the best fit for it right now is the Silly Weeper. There are some better DPS throughput options in the scout rifle category. Even Blue Beetle beats Silly Weeper in some cases, and of course the Wave of Light is very good, but both of those are high fire rate, low firearm attack, whereas the Silly Weeper is all about big damage in a single shot, and it works great for this Shimmer build. So let's go over the basic rotation here. For anyone who missed my Spine Shatter build, the function is still going to be the same. So our goal here is to take advantage of Sharen's stealth ability that allows her to go into stealth, and then when you exit stealth, it gives her a bonus to damage using the ambush passive. So when you exit stealth of active camouflage, you get ambush, which increases all your outgoing damage for a single shot or for a very short duration, and then you're able to increase that with overcharged edge, which is one of her Transcendent mods. So we can get this one here. This one will consume active shields. It consumes 50% of your active shields unless your active shields is set to 1 using overwhelming HP. Then it'll just not take any shields at all, but in general, it'll just consume some shields in order to increase the shot after you exit stealth. And so the general usage here for this is still going to be the same as Spine Shatter, in where you will reload in order to get the bonus from the strengthened first shot, then you go stealth, and then you go ahead and fire on the target. And you'll notice the damage is less than Spine Shatter, but it's going to be a lot more usable. And what we're doing with this build, separate from Spine Shatter, is we're actually going to be drastically reducing the cooldown so that we can use the stealth bonus more often. In order to accomplish that, we're still going to use Nimble Fingers for skill cooldown, MP Conversion for a higher skill cooldown reduction than like Time Distribution, for example. Then we run Multi-Talented because it is a dimension skill, so we'll get another skill cooldown on top of that. And then, as a very easy way to get the skill cooldown down, but you sacrifice some defense, you can also run Focus on Electric at level 1. Don't upgrade this. You don't need to. You're not using skill power anyway. We just want the passive of skill cooldown, and then Focus on Dimension for skill cooldown, which brings you to a total of 74.3% cooldown reduction. So you can see that once we have this full cooldown build, we can stealth, we can activate, we can fire, and then we can stealth again, and then we can activate and we can fire, and then we can stealth again, and we can keep doing that over and over. We're not going to have as much of the burst there, but it still is quite useful to do that. It's a little bit more ammo consumption. Now, because we're not going to be relying so much on the strengthened first shot, you can still kind of play like the Spine Shatter build in that you only use your sniper rifle when you have strengthened first shot available. So what you can do is you can reload to trigger strengthen first shot, then you can activate your shield in order to activate the bonus damage, fire at the target, and then switch to your Silly Weeper, and then you can just start shooting. And then stealth whenever it's available, fire at the target, stealth whenever it's available, fire at the target, and just keep doing that. And that's perfect for the Silly Weeper. It does very high base damage. The Silly Weeper is not fully upgraded at all. We can just keep stealthing and firing, and it gives us really nice cooldown reduction on that and consuming your shields up. Now, you have a couple options for the shields as well on how you're going to be playing this in general, just because there's going to be some different mods you can use. You can use overwhelming HP. There's pros and cons to this option here. Number one, shields aren't crazy good by default. Your defense is better if it's invested into defense as a stat and HP as a stat. So consuming your shields this way is actually quite efficient because you actually take any excess max shields that we'll be using for the build and convert it into max HP, which is super nice. It also gives you a very easy way to have shields active, and since it doesn't consume your active shield when you get overcharged edge, it's very easy to consistently use this over and over. The one downside with overwhelming HP, however, is that since you're at one shield, if you take any amount of damage, it will break your shields, and there is a cooldown before you start regenerating your shields when they're fully broken, before you can start getting shields back again, which means that you won't be able to use your overcharged edge if you take a little bit of damage. Your shields will be on cooldown, you won't be able to activate that, and you'll have to wait a couple seconds to do it. So what you could do is you could swap overwhelming HP out for something else if you really wanted to, if you wanted to be a little bit more consistent with the usage of your overcharged edge, and because your shields aren't crazy high, you can stealth as much as you want and get as much damage out of that as you want. Next, let's talk about the components and the reactor as well. The full build for both the Silly Weeper and the Afterglow Sword are on this sheet here, so if you're curious about that, I have both of these listed over here as well. Note that the last item, the last module for Afterglow Sword is kind of a throw up. There's not really anything you can put in that last slot to give it more damage. My preference is in order to convert rounds into it, especially since you can upgrade the general round conversion mods, and once you upgrade them all the way, they're worth 6, which is very easy. It means you don't have to catalyze that slot and you're good to go. And then for the Silly Weeper, I think it is worth to only go up to 12 on the elemental mods and then swap those in per the boss that you're fighting to do damage there, and then keep everything else maxed out and catalyzed in order to have that extra efficacy there. Then for the actual mod, like external component setup, in this case, we're not going to go with a yellow set. I think the best set for this one is actually going to be Veteran Marksman. This gives you firearm crit rate, firearm attack, and most importantly, weak point damage, which you're going to be using a lot of on the Silly Weeper and the Afterglow Sword. You could also run Acrobat, which is the other purple set that gives firearm crit rate. It's much higher firearm crit rate, but the weak point, the loss in weak point and the loss in firearm attack, I think is pretty big in this build here. So that's going to be the mods. And then for these are the stats you're going to want best in slot, all gold rolls. For the reactor, the mounting doesn't matter. And I saw these questions in my Spine Shatter build, but if you're doing a pure firearm attack build, the mounting doesn't matter, because what the mounting does is it increases your skill power. This build does not use skill power at all. It doesn't matter. You can use you could use a fire reactor here if you really wanted to. You just want a reactor with good stats on it. So you want skill cooldown and skill cost ideally, but you could also do like skill cooldown and like effect duration if you wanted to use this reactor for outposts as well. But realistically, you just want skill cooldown more than anything else on your reactor. And then the same thing goes like for the external components. You want the same stats. You want 4 of 4 on the Veteran Marksman, and like I said, for the external components, you could also do the Acrobat, which is, I think, a little bit, it's higher crit rate, less firearm attack, and no weak point, but it does mean you'll crit a little bit more. I just think overall it's not as strong as the Veteran Marksman set will be. Then when it comes to core mods, I think that listed here are the 10 out of the 12 mods you're going to want to look at. Personally, for me, I think you just want a good mixture of damage output. So like shot focus is required. I would say that MP conversion, nimble fingers, multi-talented is required, and I would certainly run increased defense and increased HP with this build. So that kind of puts you in your core set here. Run overcharged edge, upgrade it if you can, and run whatever sub-module you're comfortable with. I personally like long-distance maneuvering. And then for these last slots here, you could do the super cheeky, like unupgraded focus on electric and focus on dimension for more cooldown on your stealth, but you could also run more defense. Some things that are really strong for defense, the immunities are very good. So the debuff immunities, insulated conductor, anti-freeze solution, perfect anti-venom, and heat release are very good for the late boss fights. Like being immune to burn against against Molten Fortress, being immune to Frostbite against Gluttony or Frostwalker. These things are very useful, and I would recommend slotting these in depending on the boss fight you're working, because it gives you a lot of free damage, prevention, and damage reduction overall, which is super nice. Then for more defense, you can also run Battle of Stamina for more HP, and one of my favorites to run just in any build overall is actually going to be the Autoimmunity build. Autoimmunity is one of my favorite mods because it just gives you a flat 10.5% damage reduction modifier, and it gives you HP recovery as well, which is useful for incoming healing from other sources as well as the consumables on the ground. It just keeps you in higher HP for longer periods of time, and is generally just a very nice tanky mod to put on your character. And again, I would make sure you run Afterglow Sword and Silly Weeper, the purple scout rifle, and then any mobbing weapon you want to just be able to kill whatever. You know, I like Greg's, you can run Thunder Cage. There's tons of mobbing weapons. You can even run Enduring Legacy here if you wanted, just to have that there. This is mostly just going to be single target burst damage, and you're almost always running for weak point in every single shot for the Afterglow Sword and for the Silly Weeper. I actually find that Special Sight is kind of nice to run on Silly Weeper. You can also run Real Life Fighter if you want to aim for the weak point. The Silly Weeper is accurate enough by default. And another thing to note about the Silly Weeper as well is it is actually very accurate, well scoped in, regardless, even if you're running half aiming, it's very accurate. However, I found in some cases I like running accuracy on it to increase the hip fire, which means that I can kind of not scope in. One of the challenges with scoped weapons in the First Descendant is that they don't have variable distances. So sometimes, you know, if you're running a sniper rifle and you're like this close, it's kind of annoying to try and aim this way. So oftentimes, you know, you get kind of used to hip firing with these. So like I'll still hip fire with the Afterglow Sword, I'll still hip fire with the Silly Weeper, especially when you're up close. And then when you have fire rate up on the Silly Weeper, you can actually get some good fire out of it. So sometimes I'll run like hit rate insight with the Silly Weeper just to give a little bit more accuracy on hip fire, so I can do this just to make it a little bit more usable. But most of the time, I think you still want to be scoping in to get that extra accuracy, especially if you're running Special Sight as your special mod for that weapon. But that is the more general purpose Sharen build, the Shimmer Sharen, where you're just doing the stealth over and over as long as you have resources and dealing damage. I think the Silly Weeper is a super underrated weapon that functions great for these kind of builds, and it also means you don't have to worry about managing your shield amount, you don't have to worry about managing your HP or keeping it low, and you also don't have to worry about accidentally consuming too much HP or putting yourself in a weak spot. I do think overall the Spine Shedder, if when played correctly, is more damage than this one, but this one is a lot easier to play and a lot more comfortable to play as well, because it doesn't have those same requirements that the previous one is, so I wanted to include this as an option.
If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.